Слава Україні!
Hello everyone, my name is Paul and welcome back to the new news. I hope that everyone is having a fantastic day. I hope that you, your family, and your friends are safe, and if not, I do hope that you find that safety and security in the very near future. There is a ton of stuff happening throughout the world, especially regarding the country of Ukraine, and of course other major things happening throughout the world, both in geopolitics, anti-terrorism, and general catastrophes and what have you, that's happening around the world. And as you can tell by kind of that running theme, exactly kind of what ends up making the news. Unfortunately, when it comes to the news, there's a lot of death, destruction, a lot of things that just are pretty bad that are happening to people. It's causing widespread problems for people all over the world. And so that is why here at the New News, we're never doing super chats, we're never monetizing this for personal gain, we're never merchandising, because everything that we do here on the New News is to help people. It's to bring awareness to what's happening in the world around you, report on the news, but also to give you the opportunity to help us be the news that gives back. And the way that we're able to do that is by going through that video description down below, and you're going to find a ton of different organizational links down there. All of them, 70% or more of the donations that they receive go directly to their programs, meaning they go to helping people, with 30% or less going to things like salaries and administration's costs. And that is why that's why we're here. We're here to try and help people. This is why we classify ourselves as the news that gives back, because we want to give back and help the people that are affected by the very same news stories we are reporting on every single day. And if you can't give a lot to these organizations, give a little. If you can't give anything at all, that's okay too. Trust me, I understand. There's a ton of different ways to help us here at the channel, so that way we can raise more awareness, we can bring this news to more people. Those likes and subscribes, sharing this content amongst your friends and communities is really how this thing has grown so far. It's been awesome to see this thing grow from literally nobody and clear up to over 350 people now, which is where we're at. And it's fantastic, this community that you guys have put together, and I can't wait to see where we continue on with the future, with hopefully being able to raise lots of money by putting fundraisers directly onto the streams, which is the hope here, at least in the near future, to get to that point. So thank you very much for that. And if you have any questions as we go through the news here, please feel free to ask them. A lot of people have a lot of questions, especially when it comes to the conflicts ongoing there. And so to give you a little bit of a background on myself, I served as an 0352 anti-tank missileman and a corporal with 2nd Battalion, 7th Marines here in the United States Marine Corps. And then I did 2 tours to the Middle East during that time. My first tour between October of 2017, March of 2018, I spent about 4.5 months in the country of Syria. During that time, I was part of Operation Inherent Resolve, and I was attached to Special Operations Forces inside of Syria, fighting against the Islamic State. Also providing stabilization efforts there in the northeastern part of the country, mostly in Deir ez-Zor and Al-Hasaka provinces. Came back to the States, ran an armory within my company for about 2 years before redeploying between October of 2019 through March of 2020. And during that time, I was the Javelin team leader for the Crisis Response Company out of Kuwait. On New Year's of 2020, I actually was one of the 100 Marines that responded to the Baghdad Embassy complex. I provided security, resecured the embassy and all personnel there. And also provided I was in charge of all anti-armor operations over the Baghdad Embassy complex and did consulting for company level information regarding such. And then I went to Saudi Arabia, trained Saudi Arabian Marines, preparing to deploy down into Yemen. I'm a fully cross-trained rifleman, a fully cross-trained machine gunner. I am a partially cross-trained radar operator. I am also a CLS certified Marine, meaning I received additional medical training on top of what most Marines do receive, and I do have experience providing aid to trauma patients. In reality, I have gone and done that as well during my time in Syria, and I am also, of course, a subject matter expert in anti-armor warfare and armor doctrine. So, if you have any questions regarding any of that stuff, I'd be more than happy to go around and make sure that I can try and answer whatever questions you may have. And outside of that, I try to remain very well-rounded. There's a lot of other topics I have interest in: history, geopolitics, of course, human geography, science. However, I claim not to be an expert. I always implore that you, as the viewer, please do your own research, even if one of these topics does give you some kind of interest. So please be sure to check the video description, because we do have these maps available on our website if you would like to have a if you would like to have a starting point for any of your research. With that, we get right into the news here. Josh from Brooks says, I noticed that there's a warning on the videos now. When I watch the repeats, we need to be signed in and not too young to view them. Unfortunately, despite the fact that we go through and we vet, and we're keeping a very close eye on what is considered to be graphic and what's not, we have a pretty good sense as to that just from our own experiences here on the channel. A lot of us have some experience with dealing with these kinds of situations before. YouTube, unfortunately, does not feel that some of it is appropriate. They feel that some of it may be too graphic, may encourage violence, or it may be sensational, is the word that they like to use. This is something that YouTube has been criticized for before in the past, but it's not something we're reporting the news. We will continue on in our endeavors. We've had entire videos removed before because of some of the stuff that's happened, and I will admit that some things that we did not intend to go, get into the streams has unfortunately made it to the streams in the past. But it is definitely something to be cognizant. If you are watching this with young children, or you do have children around, I will implore you to please be mindful. I am also not the most clean person when talking. In general, I do have a little bit of, I can swear much like a sailor, but the reality is that this stuff should come with the disclaimer of it is not necessarily for children's eyes. I don't think, even if we are bringing out pretty much all of that gore and violence, but you are talking about wars and conflicts in very terrible situations, and it should be, it should not be understated that this could be very desensitizing to children or very traumatizing to children to see this very young. So please keep that in mind if you happen to have young ones nearby listening to this or watching this with you. But with that, we immediately go here and into the news. And we start off, of course, here in Ukraine, which is the special report of the night, as it has been since the war started. And we jump down here into Kyiv, where we have our first update. And unfortunately, another massive missile strike was carried out against Ukraine. Quote, on the night of February 16th, Ukrainian air defense forces shot down 16 out of 36 Russian missiles launched at critical infrastructure facilities in different regions of Ukraine. That's coming from Valery Zaluzhny, who's the commander-in-chief of the armed forces of Ukraine. And we do see that coming from the Ukrainian Defense Ministry here. They did end up reaching their targets in some cases, which is very unfortunate. But you can see coming here as well their total for what they shot down over the night. So that is, these kinds of attacks are likely to continue to be carried out. We are likely going to be seeing these attacks coming for some time, and we will see them vary in what is being used in some cases. Unfortunately, when it comes to these will probably actually increase in their pace, especially as we're getting near that anniversary to the beginning of the war. Unfortunately, we can probably expect something pretty big happening there. Thank you, by the way, Riley, for posting the weather, what's happening in Ukraine, because weather has a very big impact on what's happening in war zones, and especially when it comes to the operations in Ukraine. And it also is something that actually helps us when we're doing our research, going through trying to identify, because not all of these, some people have, around this area or, in this area, but it can be sometimes very difficult to identify when or where something is happening. And two of the biggest things that help us are the weather. What is the weather in a given area at some point in time? If it's snowing, if it's raining, if it's overcast, if it's clear and sunny, if it's warm, what have you. And also kind of the general topography of what's, of where you're at in Ukraine. Sometimes you can actually pull a lot from just giant open fields. But thank you very much for that, because it gives us quite a bit of an insight of what's getting ready to happen. And a little bit more uplifting news as we move away from the massive missile strikes that were carried out here throughout Ukraine and have brought down more critical civilian infrastructure across the country. We can, look and see here that 101 Ukrainians have officially returned home. Quote, another exchange of prisoners between Ukraine and Russia has taken place. 100 Ukrainian defenders and 1 civilian have returned home. Among them are 94 defenders of Mariupol, including 63 soldiers from Azovstal. And that is coming from Andrei Yermak, who is the head of the presidential office. These guys. Of course. Gotta do that group photo of them, but these guys have been through a pretty horrific amount. That one's coming from Ilya Ponomarenko, a independent reporter with the Kyiv Independent. Once again, you can see that photo. Guys, very happy to be home, getting some food, because they have not ate very well since they were captured. As you can see, these guys pretty happy about finally being able to come home. Unfortunately, the good news does kind of end there, because what we see is a war crime update coming from the General Prosecutor's Office. And quotes, February 10th through the 17th, 2023, 1,372 new crimes registered, at least 461 children killed, and 923 injured, and that's without full consideration of places of active hostilities, places like Bakhmut, Volodar, places where children are still there. However, the situations are too fluid and there's too much going on to get accurate readings on what's happening there. And this does come out from a graphic from the General Prosecutor's Office there in Ukraine. This covers everything from February 10th through the 17th. So far, 70,180 war crimes and crimes of aggression have been registered with them, with an additional 16,882 crimes against national security registered. Of course, 461 children so far have been killed, 923 having been injured thus far in the war. And these are the ones that are just Ukraine has gone through and confirmed in one way or another. So move on from that, we immediately roll here into the battlefront, the battle space here in the Donbass, and specifically in the Donetsk region, where the significant amount of the fighting is ongoing. At least the fighting that we see a lot of information coming from. Unfortunately, there is fighting happening around Kremina, around Svetove, along this front, Belhorivka as well in the Luhansk Oblast. But when it comes to what's happening in the battle space, what's actually being reported on and information coming from, we're seeing stuff coming from Donetsk more significantly. And one of these things is actually from the head of the Donetsk Regional Military Administration himself. This is Pavlo Kolenko, who's given us our latest daily Donetsk update. And he said that, quote, on February 16th, number of victims of Russian army in Donetsk Oblast increased by 5 killed, 10 injured. And this came out from the graphic he released at 8 a.m. local time this morning. And it happens to be 5 killed and 9 injured in the city of Bakhmut, with another 1 injured there in Avdiivka. Since the beginning of the war, not including places under occupation, such as Volnovakha or Mariupol, where we know that there are tens of thousands of people who have been killed or injured, or both, in places that are under Ukrainian control, so far 1,372 people have been killed, with an additional 3,062 having been injured. Quite significant in those statistics. Unfortunately, that northern flank does continue to collapse as fighting continues. Krasnohora appears to have been actually occupied based off of the other events that are coming out now. And that's because the Wagner Group has captured Peraskovivka, which is here on the northern flank of Bakhmut, continuing to attempt that encirclement movement of the city of Bakhmut. The Russian Wagner Group is a private military corporation that was founded in 2014 by a man named Yevgeny Prigozhin, who used to run a catering company and catered to Putin, and is therefore also a part of his inner circle. So this is unfortunately marking yet another city that is to be considered currently occupied by Russian forces. This is them at the city's administration's building. Once again, also located in the same area. You can see they're sporting their Wagner Group patches. very clearly designating who they are. But the Battle of Bakhmut continues. Bakhmut does still hold. Fighting continues around the outskirts despite the near encirclement of the city. And it appears that Ukrainian reinforcements have arrived. Now, I've heard some things being said about these reinforcements, and I'd be more than happy to dissuade you of them. So I actually had a conversation with, of course, my buddy at work, Rob, and, they were saying that, supposedly they're sending in, these raw, really, just kind of cannon fodder into Bakhmut to relieve their battle-hardened guys, for when the city falls, and so that way they have a defensive force that knows what they're actually doing. And that does not appear to be the case, despite what some Russian channels may be claiming. The reinforcements actually coming in, they appear to be relieving and or bolstering units already there, because the reality is these combat proven units that have been there, they've been fighting in this city for months and months on end now, and they're being rotated once again because it appears that they are rotated once again because these units, because of the very heavy fighting, part of the reason we're seeing, I suspect that we're seeing some of these issues, especially in the northern part, is one, the units are attrited. They also have taken casualties. Usually about 2/3 of what the Russians have taken are the casualties Ukraine are looking at least doctrinally, going by the Love's doctrine on casualty rates in attritive warfare. And the issue is that these units are attrited. They've taken manpower losses, equipment losses, but they're also exhausted. You can only do this kind of stringent combat for so long before these units become combat ineffective. They just don't have any gas left in them. It's kind of like you need to fill a car to keep it going. And unfortunately, that's kind of the reality here. So they're rotating these forces off the line. We see fresh troops actually starting to come in. Of course, war monitors, which is definitely leans on the Russians much more, but we can see here these are reportedly it's probably maybe a small battalion or about a company more or less of troops that are getting ready to head out. Fresh troops, we see National Guardsmen that have arrived here in this region. We can see, fresh uniforms. This really is a telltale sign. You can tell these guys probably haven't been here all that long. Uniforms, boots, fairly still clean. Relatively, kind of fresh in the face. You can see their equipment's relatively fresh. These guys are fresh into the city. These guys don't look like they've been fighting there all particularly long. Once again, a sign that those rotations are happening. I just clicked the same thing. I apologize. You see tanks rolling in here. And the interesting thing about these tanks is the majority of the tanks that we're getting ready to see throughout this have actually previously been Russian. This, for instance, this is a T-80, which is primarily operated by the Russians. We see that was likely captured. T-72 here, likewise. Same thing with this T-72 as well. And about the only one that we don't see being a captured unit is actually this tank right here. This is actually a T-64BV, which is really the standard of the Ukrainian military, at least prior to the war. Ervis says, how many? Question mark. Attrition rates are very hard. War is very hard to, accurately state as being, really go through and go with, any kind of solid numbers. And my favorite example of this is the invasion of Iraq. The United States military, based off of battlefield commanders, battlefield assessments, after action reports, casualties are, we would have killed the Iraqi army 7 times over in its entirety. So casualties are very, very difficult to talk to for either side. So we simply just kind of shy away from that unless we're talking about very small, very much we can clearly see what's going on there kind of incidents. Era says I met reinforcements. That is a number we are not privy to. So that is certainly a number we're not going to be privy to. And even if we were, that's not something that I would necessarily be announcing here on the channel. Because you don't want the enemy to know how many troops are going into an area, whether you're talking about, for general operations, even humanitarian operations. They generally don't release those numbers. That's just because of how operational security works. So that it's just not something that we're necessarily going to know. Now, what we do know is what we have heard in the past, and supposedly there's about 20 or about 25, 30, 35,000 Ukrainian troops that are operating in this 23-mile long sector of the front line, starting up here near Belorivka and then dropping down here to Zaitsev. And so that really should tell you, that's the scale of Ukrainian forces. About rotational troops coming in are going to be replacing the troops that are already on the line, essentially. So reinforcements are talking about fresh troops coming into the battle space. Those troops that have been fighting for a while being rotated out because they're simply no longer combat effective. And that's kind of why you're starting to see some of these losses that Ukraine is taking in places like Krasnohora and up there with the village that was captured today, Peraskovivka. But simply put, we're just not privy to that. Now, some interesting footage that came out today, and has over the last 48 hours, is some very up-close personal fighting in Bakhmut. This is from a Ukrainian soldier in the trench, and this is a story in 3 parts of some very heavy fighting around this area. So as you can see here, very close contact. Rounds flying right over, hands his buddy an RPG. But these rounds are coming right over the trench line. And that's what we're getting ready to see here. As you can see, everything, falling around him. He's going to pop up here. And I don't know if you noticed that. But you can see the guys right here in this tree line. Right in front. He is firing an RPG, essentially point-blank range, at Russian forces that are pretty much walking into this trench. That is how close of an engagement this is. And this is how many of these engagements have of just guys that are super close. It's very up close, personal, and fighting here. Rounds landing right in front of this trench there.
Автомат!
The guy that's shooting from that tree in front. David says Russia's in some cases, yeah. See guys getting really up close.
Мой автомат, дай!
Trying to walk right into the trench. This is not the position you would ever.
Вот пидоры лезут! Пидоры лезут! Автомат не утримует.
He's just dumping around. And this kind of a situation. Well, can I offer you a grenade in this trying time? That's probably been my favorite thing that has happened. Toss a frag over there. His buddy hands him another one. So, in this kind of a situation, your best bet is to put as much hate and discontent downrange as physically possible. That is your best bet. Unfortunately, that's just kind of the reality of what we're talking about. So, looks like most of this is just a continuation of the engagement here and just snippets of it. But you can get the point. that what you're talking about up close and personal like this is just the, it's very intimate, obviously, and it's a very terrifying situation. It's very difficult to describe. When the enemy is getting this close to you, things have usually gone pretty bad, and it's not a great position to be in. It's very terrifying. It's very nerve-wracking. There's also kind of I wouldn't say it's calm, but when they start getting that close, literally all you can do is throw everything you can. You are pushing your body, 250%, to do everything you can and throw everything you can at them. And as you see, there's not a lot of guys in that trench, in that section of the trench. It says they're losing hundreds a day. Ukraine has more ground won. Yeah, the reality, the Russians they're conducting, this kind of, it's trench warfare. It's very much World War I reminiscent. And this kind of assaulting that we're seeing here in Bakhmut has literally left a sea of bodies. It's horrific to see what happens. Delta Aviation asks, Delta Aviation 23 asks, what are you guys planning for the 1-year anniversary? So we actually, I have been working, and the team has been working very hard on a 1-year anniversary video that covers the entirety of the war. It's going to be an actual video as opposed to a stream. It's the first one that we're doing on the channel, and that will be debuting on the exact time that it all the exact time it all started, which is about 10 p.m. Eastern Time, February 23rd, or 6 a.m. local time there in Kyiv. So that, for those that are interested, that will be debuting, and we'll have that ready for a premiere here very early this upcoming week. So, but we are already, for the most part, almost finished with it. There's a lot of work that's been put into it, so I hope that you guys do enjoy it, and we are hoping to do more. So if you have more video content ideas, please go ahead and comment and let us know. I'm looking for more to do that you guys like. David says, those helmets won't stop any bullets up close. Most helmets, most military helmets, you see a lot of people saying, oh, is this armored class or this armored class? General rule of thumb, your helmet, your Kevlar helmet, is not going to stop, if it's proper Kevlar, is not going to stop anything above a 9mm round. Its main purpose in life is to protect you from shrapnel, not necessarily anything else. Artillery mortars have been the most effective. That's because, statistically speaking, shrapnel wounds, artillery, mortar fire, grenades, explosives in general are going to be the most dangerous thing on the battlefield. The majority of your body armor protection is actually not meant to stop incoming rounds themselves. It's more or less to deflect and to minimize, the injuries that you will receive on the battlefield. And you can look at statistics. The largest creator of casualties on the west, or on any front of the First World War, is artillery. Same thing, World War II, shrapnel wounds account for the vast majority of all casualties received throughout the duration of the war that are due to combat. And we can see that also Vietnam, of course, Iraq, Afghanistan, the First Gulf War. The majority of conflicts in modern history are shrapnel, artillery, shrapnel from artillery and blast wounds and things of that nature that are creating the most casualties. It's usually not, the machine gun fire, the rifle fire, because it's actually fairly hard to hit people, especially when they're shooting back. It's not like a shooting gallery. It's not like a video game. It's very difficult. Come over here into Luhansk, the city of Luhansk itself. And reportedly, according to the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, quote, another group of Iranian instructors has arrived in occupied Ukrainian city of Luhansk. They are supposed to train Russian invaders. They're supposed to train the Russian invaders to work with Shahed drones. Shahed 131, 136 drone, very simple drone design, but effective, and it makes it very cheap and it's easy to produce. And these are a Iranian design. They are native to Iran, and they have been sold and continue to be sold by Iran to Russia to be used because missiles are very expensive, and Russia is running out of their stockpile that they're allotting for combat in the country of Ukraine. So quite a bit of stuff ongoing there. But they're using, these Shahed drones in lieu of missiles that they're running out of because they're much cheaper, and the air defense systems usually are much more expensive. The missiles that are firing to shoot them down are, generally speaking, much more expensive than what they're actually shooting down, and wars are won with economies. We can check out here. This is the assault on Volodar as we come back here into the Donetsk Oblast, and the Russian assault against the city of Volodar does continue, and entire companies of Russian forces have been obliterated by minefields and various other types of defensive emplacements. Whether you're talking about artillery pieces and placed machine guns, interlocking fields of fire, but entire companies completely wiped out off the face of the earth. Absolutely horrendous losses. It's a complete, and I do mean complete, tactical failure from the leadership position. As a result, Russian troops, they've begun to rely very heavily on the artillery shelling, even more than they were before. And we even have a video here today of a TOS-1A using thermal barrack munitions in order to complete their objectives here. And this is actually going to be the first one that we have. This is the TOS-1A engaging the city of Volodar. These are thermal barrack munitions, also known as aerosol munition. These are meant for destroying hardened emplacements. Seen them used, over and over and over again in the war in Ukraine. That means that is now a systematic tactic. And once something becomes systematic under the 1993 Rome Statute, it's actually considered to be a crime against humanity, because protection of civilian populations does not just include the people themselves, but their infrastructure, meaning homes and hospitals and stores, and basically limiting collateral damage to an absolute minimum. We can see here what I'm talking about when it comes to the devastating losses. Two tanks side by side, and you can see a lot as they run in a line here. This whole column appears to have been wiped out. This one's even got a mine sweep, it's got a mine roller right here on the front. He tried to use his buddy as cover. They didn't even make it within engagement range of the city of Volodar. Didn't even make it within an engagement range, truly, of the city before they were knocked out completely. And this isn't the only instance that we have. We see here, yet once again, another tank completely destroyed. More BMPs knocked out of commission. And that's a wider area. This is a wider view of what we're talking about. And you can see, this entire assault completely wiped out. David says it should be legal. Chemicals are good for hiding spots. Chemicals are an absolutely horrific means of warfare. And I do not ever and will never endorse their usage. Ever. Will never, ever endorse their usage. I mean, you don't have to look very far to see, you know, the horrendous effects of chemical weapons. This is one of the initial things, you know, coming out of World War I. Of that was so terrible. Let's never do that again. Chemical weapons are horrific in how they kill people, especially nerve agents. I mean, and they're indiscriminate. So that violates other protocols of the conventions. They're indiscriminate. And it cause unnecessary suffering, I think, is really probably... You know, war is inhumane enough, as is. And the same reason you shouldn't burn people alive. You shouldn't use incendiary munitions. It's why they are also banned. And so it's just exceptionally horrific. I mean, look at what's happened in Syria. So you open that door. That door opens two ways, I think, is really the point I'm trying to make when it comes to chemical weapons. That door opens two ways. It would be good for flushing out Russian troops from a location, but that would also bring up some pretty horrific things elsewhere. Come down here into the city of Mariupol, where Ukrainian books were dumped from the local university at Prayazovsky State University there in Mariupol. All Ukrainian books were thrown. Many were directly out of the windows and stacked in front of the school to be discarded. And it really kind of brings back some very famous images, specifically from World War II. It comes to mind those giant book burning ceremonies that were held by the Nazis. That kind of gives me the same kind of feeling looking at this. Knowledge is power. And by doing this, it really shows you can see he's throwing books right out this window. You know, doing this, you know, really kind of illustrates the point of the war for the Russians. It's not about, you know, it's not about biolabs. It's not about, you know, NATO expansionism. It's not about, you know, the United States. It's not about, you know, feeling threatened or security issues. This is a war of Russification, which has been done throughout history. You can look at what happened to Poland for a significant amount of time in the 1700s. You can look at what happened to Ukraine under the USSR. You can look at what happened to the entirety of Eastern Europe. You can look at what happened, you know, to Germany following World War II when it was split apart, and you can see, you know, where Russia has tried to take whatever they can away. They remove that identification of that group, assimilating a group, or exterminating them. And we've seen that happen many times before. Subjugation of the Tatars. You see the people down in Chechnya. What happened in the 90s when they tried to vow for independence because they didn't want to sign the Confederation. They didn't want to sign as part of the Russian Federation. So, but this is a clear, pretty telltale sign of genocide based off of national lines, which is very much outlined in the 1993 Rome Statute and the 1949 Geneva Conventions. And Charlton Brooks says, I read that CS was being used, but it's illegal on the battlefield. Not sure who's used it, but I saw drones dropping it. Both sides have used CS gas. We have confirmed. Both sides, Ukrainian and Russian, have used CS gas. There are videos of both of them using CS gas against each other, utilizing drone systems. David says sarin gas. Sarin is horrific and should never have ever been created. And Ferris says it's probably a nerve agent. It is. And I don't recommend looking it up. Jump over here into Megalev, where there's been an opening in the History of the War exhibition. And the exhibition, My History of War, dedicated to the anniversary of the illegal invasion of the Russian Federation into Ukraine, was opened on February 17th, or today, in the Central City Library, named after M.L. Kopyvinitsky. The event took place within the framework of the Project Challenge, Creativity Against War, where more than 30 artists ended up participating. So we can take a picture here, or we can take a look here. That's some pretty beautiful different types of art that are being used here. Creation of dolls. Very beautiful works being done. Lots of talent. You know, a lot of creativity has come out of this. You know, out of this pretty horrendous situation. A lot of, you know, creativity, a lot of, you know, artistic, you know, abilities have come out throughout the duration of this and have really, you know, kind of illustrated the good side of humanity to oppose the very, very horrendous side of humanity. And dare I say, a lack thereof. But pretty amazing to see. And out of the port region of Odessa, the we do have a grain initiative update as we cap off the rest of Ukraine for the night. Quote, over the past week, 25 ships have left Ukrainian ports with almost 1 million tons of Ukrainian grain and other food on board as part of the Black Sea Grain Initiative, end quote. And that's coming from the press service of the Ukrainian Navy of the Armed Forces of Ukraine. And so with that, that actually wraps up all of the news stories inside of the country of Ukraine. But that's not everything there is in the news. There's tons of other stuff going on. And we immediately move over here into Poland, where Poland is actually considering to give Ukraine MiG-29s. President of Poland, Andrzej Duda, mentioned that Poland is considering transferring MiG-29 aircraft to Ukraine in an interview with correspondent at Ukreininform. MiG-29s are currently in active use by the Polish military, but those could also be getting replacements here soon. And the MiG-29 is a Soviet-era system, and it is something that the Ukrainians would already know how to employ as they continue to have that need for aircraft, because aircraft losses are occurring. It's just not necessarily something that we're always seeing. In the United Kingdom, training continues for Ukrainian recruits that are trained under the UNIFER project up there. And these are NATO and allied instructors that are providing a fast-paced course for brand new Ukrainian military recruits. These aren't guys that have fought before. And these are guys that are brand new and they are learning how to do their jobs. And these guys, thousands of which have already been rotated back. We can see a large majority of them, or a large number of them, have been rotated and created into the 47th Assault Brigade, which has been newly formed inside of Ukraine. But very good training that they are getting. We can see really them developing those basic tactics, and you know, from the videos and photos that I have seen of Ukrainian recruits, you know, they are, you know, doing what they need to, you know, they're doing what you would expect somebody with proper training to be doing. Very different in kind of fighting than what we see from more battle hardened guys that were, you know, that are continuously been on the front lines and have been kind of training on the job per se. You know, they had more Soviet era tactic doctrines at the beginning of the war. That's what they learned. That's what they trained in, and they've had to develop since then. These guys are getting that NATO style training, and I'm seeing the expectations of how they're stacking up on doors, how they're conducting patrols, how they are, you know, how they're establishing bases of fire, how they're conducting MOUT or military operations in urbanized terrain. And I'm seeing a very impressive display of capability from them. See, these guys, they are going through training here. This is some urban training, providing assistance to casualties. So, definitely some very good work that they're doing here. Of course, you got those instructors doing what they need to do. This is actually, what they're doing here is actually very interesting. So, they're conducting a MOUT course. And MOUT courses are, MOUT stands for Military Operations in Urbanized Terrain, MOUT. And what they're doing shoot houses, or tape houses, is what this really is, where they outline a house in tape, and you go through very slowly, 2 and 4 man groups of clearing, a room or a house or whatever. So that way you see, what you need to do, and you see the outlines, but you can kind of, pace yourself instead of going right into a building and learning how to do it there. Because that is actually very difficult if you don't get the very basics of clearing the fatal funnel, J-hooking or whatever you need to do, breaking left or right, clearing your corner, immediately sweeping through the room and establish your stance and check out your overhead and all of that fun stuff. So if you don't have those basics down, it's very difficult to go into an actual building and do these things. You want to scale that stuff up. David says M1 Abrams tanks and Leopards are going to get delivered. Germany's saying like 20 Leopard tanks. A lot of emphasis has been put on these tanks. I think a little too much. Definitely good tanks. Definitely is going to make a very good improvement. But once again, I think that the military equipment that is being sent to Ukraine, it's easier to do a job with better tools. But it's not about having better or worse tools as much as it is how you use them. Main battle tanks, modern main battle tanks, east and west, susceptible to the exact same things. Tandem charged, anti-tank guided missiles, aircraft, large caliber artillery. There's other tanks. They're susceptible to the same types of fire. There's different advantages in survivability and optical suites and fire control subsystems that are really what makes some of these tanks from the Western side better than, say, their Soviet counterparts. But their Soviet counterparts also have good things to them that, give them advantages over Western main battle tanks. So it's not, you're kind of comparing, you're not really comparing apples to apples. You're more or less comparing like an apple to, say, a pear or a peach or something. Apples to oranges wouldn't quite be the same thing. I think they're a little too different in fruit, but, something close, but not quite the same. Coming down here to Italy, where a very interesting thing has happened. We continue to have more drug-related charges when it comes to our food. I always remember, being told, like, check your child's candy before, like, you let them have it and stuff. That does not seem to be the problem. Much like how Switzerland had a lot of narcotics in a Connex box full of coffee, it would appear that 100 kilograms of cocaine was found in a cheese wheel here in Italy. And the extensive operation from Guardia di Finanza of Turin throughout Italy dismantled a criminal association dedicated to the trafficking of large quantities of narcotic substances in the provinces of Turin and Asti, with the branches in Lombardy, Veneto, Tuscany, Sicily, and Sardinia. More than 100 kilograms, or 220 pounds of drugs were seized that would have generated an illegal revenue of 20 million euros, or $21.4 million USD. The cocaine was hidden in forms of Parmesan cheese. Why would you ruin a good, like, cheese roundel of, Parmesan by dumping cocaine into it? Just why? So, folks, if you have learned nothing else on this channel, it's not the candy you should worry about. Make sure you check your Parmesan for cocaine. As we jump down here and into the Middle East, we actually come onto northeastern Syria, a place I'm very, very familiar with. Now, no specific location has been listed, but we can pretty safely assume it's either Deir ez-Zor or Al-Hasaka. And a senior Islamic State leader was killed, and 4 U.S. service members were wounded. The U.S. Central Command of the U.S. Armed Forces announced the elimination of Hamza al-Khamsi, a field commander of the Islamic State in Syria, and the operation took place the day before with the support of Arab Kurdish forces in the northeastern part of the country, being the SDF. When trying to detain the jihadist resisted opened fire on the security forces. He was eliminated by return fire. 4 Americans, a dog, and a Syrian Democratic Forces fighter were all injured. The injured were taken to an Iraqi hospital. The Pentagon did not say what exactly the neutralized ISIS militant was doing. It was released by an official statement from United States Central Command. Last night, during a partnered U.S. and Syrian Democratic Forces helicopter raid in northeastern Syria, an explosion on target resulted in 4 U.S. service members and 1 working dog wounded. The targeted ISIS senior leader, Hamza al-Khamsi, was killed. The U.S. service members and working dog are receiving treatment in a U.S. medical facility in Iraq, and they will likely, saying that their injuries are significant enough, they will likely be transported later on up into Europe to receive additional treatment at better care facilities. Meanwhile, just in the north of Baghdad, we can see where the Islamic State ended up firing at Iraqi soldiers. Several government soldiers, including an assistant officer, were wounded after Islamic State militants fired on them during a search inspection in the gardens of the TURKIYE district in Shamal, Baghdad. According to local sources, the loss of government forces amounted to 3 dead and 7 wounded. We can see government forces operating there. Unfortunately, it doesn't. And those are, unfortunately, appears to be some of the dead and wounded. Are these guys who I think they are? I don't think so. Yes. So these guys look like they are golden lions. At least some of them appear. Like this guy appears to be a golden lion. For those that don't know, the Golden Lions Brigade or Golden Lions Division, it depends on how you see it. Those guys are the ones that fought and took back Mosul, and those are also the guys. They were trained by American Special Forces. They are guys that actually want to be there. They actually want to be in the Iraqi army. They're not just doing it for a paycheck. They are very good at their jobs. Have very, very good ties with American trainers, American forces, and are very, very good at what they do. But they have unfortunately been misused, I think, tactically, and suffered very, very high casualties as a result. But definitely very good at what they do. I have nothing bad to say about the Iraqi Golden Lions Division. The general Iraqi army could definitely use some work, but the Golden Lions are where it's at. So in Karachi, at least 5 people were killed after militants ended up storming a police headquarters here in Pakistan. Militants stormed a police station in southern Pakistani city of Karachi on Friday, killing 2 people and injuring an additional 11 in a hail of gunfire and a series of loud explosions before they themselves were killed. Security forces retook the building after several hours and killed 3 militants, a government spokesman said. Police commandos and a bomb disposal squad entered the building and security sweep was underway. The Tehrik-e-Taliban Pakistan, or TTP, took responsibility for the attack in a message sent by their spokesman to journalists.
अल्लाह अकबर
हट जाओ सारे पीछे आ जाओ ब्लास्ट हो गया पीछे आ जाओ और भी हो सकता है पीछे आ जाओ सारे पीछे आ जाओ ब्लास्ट हो गया पीछे आ जाओ
I see you talk about vegan cheeses in the chat. Not a fan. I like my real cheeses. I have a nice selection of cheese currently sitting in my fridge, actually. Millions of bacterial infected mosquitoes are going to be fighting dengue fever. Singapore is mass infecting mosquitoes, specifically the Aedes aegypti, with Wolbachia, a type of bacteria, so as to limit the mosquito's ability to spread dengue fever. The infection could be passed on to the next generation as well, and the technique of infecting mosquitoes to limit the spread of dengue fever has been used for years, but it has been hard to implement at scale. Singapore is replacing some manual process with automation, hoping to control the disease among the population. Between 2019 and 2022, the number of released mosquitoes has grown from 2 million per week to 5 million per week, and this has led to the reduction of Aedes aegypti mosquito and cases of dengue fever in implemented areas. If you're down in New Zealand, I am very sorry for you. I really am, because that seems like that was not a very fun time. So far, the number of casualties has increased on the North Island of New Zealand following the Cyclone Gabriel. At least 8 people so far have been confirmed dead, while more than 4,500 are currently still missing. Search and rescue operations are ongoing. Most of the impact has been reported in Hawke's Bay on the eastern coast of the North Island, where up to 37,000 households are still experiencing power outages. In southern Somalia, at least 36 people were killed in an al-Shabaab attack. Al-Shabaab fighters attacked the base of the Somali army in Barsanguni in the south of the country. It is known about 36 dead and 15 wounded. Keep in mind, this may not be all of them. In recent days, the jihadists of the MTO have inflicted a number of significant losses on government troops in different parts of the country, during which several dozen military personnel have so far been killed. Equipment and a large amount of weapons and ammunition have also been seized. We can see here some of that fighting. Unfortunately, it's very difficult to fight the Islamic State and extremist groups here in Africa because most of the African countries, they simply don't have the support that other countries have been given over the years. It's difficult enough to fight insurgency in the best case scenarios, let alone in one where your military is essentially equally equipped to them as well. Just outside of Orlando on the south side in Kissimmee, we can see where another fire has occurred here in the U.S. On Thursday, a massive fire broke out at a plant nursery in Osceola County in Florida. The fire, which started overnight, was fought by 21 units and 75 firefighters for nearly 12 hours. Throughout the day, clouds of smoke could be seen rising from properties on Poinciana Boulevard, but they have significantly slowed down. Crews are still working on cleaning up a large mess of melted plastic. Hazmat crews and the Florida Department of Environmental Protection were monitoring the air, and they reported that no hazardous material was released, no structures were damaged, and no one was hurt in the incident. Ken Brown says, I don't have any questions, but thanks for all the updates. Always happy to provide them. We continue here. We're outside of Huntsville, Alabama. 2 National Guard members were killed in a very horrific helicopter crash. 2 Tennessee National Guardsmen were killed Wednesday after a helicopter crashed during a training flight in northern Alabama. The UH-60 Black Hawk helicopter was approaching Huntsville Executive Airport when it rapidly descended, quote-unquote, and crashed around 3 p.m. near Highway 53 and Burwell Road in Huntsville, Alabama. On Thursday, the National Guard identified the 2 people killed in the crash as Chief Warrant Officers Daniel Wadham of Jolton, Tennessee, and Danny Rudolph of Murfreesboro, Tennessee. No other service members or civilians were injured in the incident. Warrant officers are pilots in the U.S. Army. The immediate release of Colonel James A. Reed. And we do have a video of that crash. Let's take a look. Our thoughts do go out to their families. John Scott says Slava Ukraini, Yeriam Slava. A Kiev Jewish Forum is currently ongoing in Washington, D.C. The Kiev Jewish Forum was held on February 15th through the 16th, 2023, with the purpose to strengthen the understanding of the Jewish community's role in development of Ukraine and to motivate international support for Ukraine's independence. It was a 2-day virtual event held by the Jewish Confederation of Ukraine and Tablet Magazine and co-sponsored by the Combat Anti-Semitism Movement, or CAAM. The 2-day event is fully accessible there online, and we do have their website linked on that bullet point there. But that is the hard-hitting news of the night, but we have some interesting news too, and that is because we want to end the night on something that's a little bit more uplifting after talking about a lot of very bad things happening throughout the world, generally speaking. So as we start off here. In the UK, the first child to receive gene therapy for fatal genetic disorder is now happy and healthy. A 19-month-old girl named Teddy recently became the first child in the United Kingdom outside of clinical trial to receive a new gene therapy for metachromatic leukodystrophy, or MLD, a fatal genetic disorder. Roughly 6 months out from treatment, Teddy is a happy and healthy toddler showing no signs of the devastating disease she was born with. Typically, MLD treatment is aiming at managing symptoms of the disease, although several experimental therapies, including bone marrow transplant and stem cells transplants, have sometimes been used to slow the disorder's progression in infants. The new gene therapy, called Libmeldy, a genetic name for adasaragine autotemcel, was only recently cleared for use by the NHS and works by inserting into the body working copies of the genes that are faulty in MLD, thus restoring the ability to break down sulfatides. If you would like some more, england.nhs.uk does have, and probably can also pronounce those a lot better than I can. I apologize. And coming out of Japan, a cosmic tadpole points to black hole near Milky Way center. An enormous deformed dust cloud that astronomers nicknamed the tadpole could point to the location of an extremely rare type of black hole never confirmed to exist in our galaxy before. A new study, researchers based in Japan describe the strange dust cloud, which looks like a big head, long-tailed tadpole that sits near the center of the Milky Way in the constellation Sagittarius, about 27,000 light years from Earth. In this region, the Milky Way is extremely dense and with star-forming dust clouds that clump around our galaxy's central supermassive black hole. And even in this extreme environment, the tadpole's shape and movement stood out to the researchers. Spatial compactness of the tadpole and the bright counterparts in other wavelengths indicate that the object could be an intermediate mass black hole, the researchers officially wrote in the study. So that is what they are talking about right here. So kind of cool. So we could have a type of black hole that has never been confirmed here in the very center of our own galaxy. If you'd like more on that, IOP Science does have a scientific study on that, and Live Science also has an article for further reading for you guys. That's actually it. That's actually everything that we have, at least from our sources for tonight. Quite a lot of stuff happening there throughout the news. A lot of unfortunate stuff, of course, happening in Ukraine, but elsewhere throughout the world as well. And I do hope that you guys found this knowledgeable as we have gone through it. I hope I was able to answer those questions to the best of my ability, and I hope that you found that those were very fulfilling answers as well. And so as we finish up here, please be sure to check out the video description below and check out all of the wonderful organizations in that description. And 70% or more of the donations that they receive go directly to their programs, with 30% or less going to things like salaries and administration's costs. If you can't give a lot to these organizations, give a little. If you can't give anything at all, that's okay too. Help us grow this channel and grow this project. The more people that are, like and comment, subscribe, share, all of that stuff on these streams and videos and on our channel in general, the more people that come here and watch this and see this and can also donate and help out people that are affected by these news stories all over the globe. So thank you very much for the support you guys have already given us. It's been amazing to grow this channel, and I cannot wait to see what we can do in the future. We hope to be able to put a fundraiser on every single stream we end up doing whenever we go live. And speaking of which, we hope that you will be joining us tomorrow night at 5 p.m. Eastern Time, 4 p.m. Central, for another 24 hours of news in review. And I hope that you guys have a fantastic start to your weekend. It's finally Friday, so I am very happy to have some time to rest and sleep in and relax. So I hope you guys are too. I hope that you and your family and your friends are safe over this weekend. And if not, I do hope that you find that safety and security in the very near future. I hope to see you back here tomorrow night when we go live. My name is Paul from the New News, and have a fantastic rest of your night, everybody. Alrighty, bye now.
Going home, Russian soldiers, going home. Бо ми всіх вас тут змішаємо з багном. І стоять до волноваги, і чудно кличе, діти нахуй. Тут працює ЗСУ і ТМО. Нам не треба ні конфлікту, ні війни. Та ми готові всіх вас слать до сатани. Тисячі вже полягло, і все більше шверхуйло. То для них нема нічого, крім труни. Going home, Russian soldiers, going home. Бо ми всіх вас тут змішаємо з багном. І стоять до волноваги, і чудно кличе, діти нахуй. Тут працює ЗСУ і ТМО. Вызволять пришел, братишка, ну привет. На моей земле тебе один ответ. Нашим людям плечом, даже танки и бачок. Вам не взять нас и за 100 000 лет. Going home, Russian soldiers, going home. чутно клич, ідіть нахуй, тут працює ЗСУ. Going home, Russian soldiers, going home. Бо ми всіх вас тут змішаємо з багном. Від стрия до волновахи і чутно клич, ідіть нахуй, тут працює ЗСУ. Going home, Russian soldiers, going home. Бо ми всіх вас тут змішаємо з багном. Від стрия до волновахи і чутно клич, ідіть нахуй, тут працює ЗСУ. Ідіть нахуй.